I'll just introduce each of you. You just want to tell us what you do and where to find you on social media, although I'm sure, especially you four, everyone knows where you are already. And then Zach's going to take Spain, which is probably going to focus a bit more towards Andy than you two guys, naturally.
But feel free to jump in if you want.
Yeah, feel free to jump in. But I think, and then Andy's going to shoot off, and we'll go to England, Italy, Champions League. I've tried to spread it out as much as possible, so you're not sat there twiddling your thumbs for 10 minutes or so. Yeah, right. I'll start the intro now. Is everyone happy?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, all good, mate.
Right, hello everybody, and welcome to Breaking the Lines, and we return for the second week. And thank you all to those. I'll start again. I'll just start again. Hello everybody, and welcome to Breaking the Lines, and we return for the second week. And thank you to all of those who listened and provided feedback to our pilot episode out last week. This week, as a bumper panel, 4 people are alongside me and returning. Zach, Breaking the Lines chief, is back. How are we doing, mate? You all right?
Doing great. Can't wait to delve into these topics today.
Very, very good. And joining us to offer some superior knowledge on Serie A is a content creator and all-round talented guy, Aaron West. How are we this evening?
I am having a great time already. Can't wait for this.
That's what compliments do to people. Next up, and if you want Manchester City, then this is your man. It's Sam Lee. How are things doing, Sam?
Yeah, good, thanks, man. I'm quite pleased to be part of this international cast. This is pretty cool.
And last but definitely not least, the man prepared to take us to Spain and provide sangria to us all. It's La Liga expert Andy West. Do we keep him well?
Yeah, very well. Enjoying some tortilla as we speak.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Can't go wrong with that.
To start off, Zach's going to take the lead while I nip off and do some errands. And he's going to take us to Spain. So you crack on, Zach.
All right, guys. So we're going to start off in Spain. And, of course, the biggest game here was the Madrid derby. Real Madrid defeated Atletico 3-1 in the derby. Atletico seemed pretty disorganized. And, after a somewhat solid start to the season, this is now their second straight league defeat. We've got the Betis loss from last weekend and just now with Real Madrid. After a 18-match unbeaten run, it seems like things could be spiraling towards a bad place as they prepare to take on Juventus. So, Andy, why do you think that this Atletico team's do you feel like this Atletico team seems perhaps not as organized as previous years? What's separating this Atletico team from previous years?
It's interesting with Atletico because I think they've overachieved for so long. Since Simeone took over, people who've, it's easy to forget the past and we live in the present. And you think, okay, Atletico, they're one of the strongest teams in Europe and they have been for a few years, but that was never the case before. They weren't even a force within Spain, really. And I think it's easy to take for granted what Diego Simeone has done there in the last 7 years to on a relative shoestring budget, to get them to compete year in, year out with Real Madrid and Barcelona has been amazing. And the fact that we're talking about it now is a bit of a shock and a bit surprising and a bit disappointing that they're not beating Real Madrid at home, I think is the biggest tribute that you can get. But there's no doubt that they aren't at the level that we've seen from them defensively in the last few years. They've still got the best record defensively in La Liga, but they don't look as solid. You'd have in the past, you'd put your house on them to not concede and to play out a 1-0 win. It's not quite the same this year. Part of it may be aging. Undoubtedly that, 3 of the key members of the back 4 are aging now. Felipe Luis, Juan Fran and Diego Godin. They're still good players, but they're not able to...
out all 3 of them are said to have their contracts expire this summer.
Right, and they'll want to go out on a high because the thing that has eluded them, they've done so much, but the thing that has eluded them, of course, is the Champions League, and no better way to do it than at home because the Champions League final is in their stadium. So they would love, if they are intending to leave, and there's a lot of speculation about that, to win the one they haven't got at home would be an incredible way to finish. But you just feel that maybe they're past their best now. They aren't able to sustain the concentration and the fitness that's required, physical fitness to play with the rigor they do defensively that they have to. It's just not easy to do that when you're in your 30s. It's a sad fact of life that I think the aging process is catching up with some of those individual players. They have had a lot of injuries as well throughout the season, a huge number of injuries. Maybe the preparation methods have been too intense, that they've tried to overcompensate for the way they can't technically match Barca and Real Madrid for the quality of individuals they've got. So they have to overcompensate with the physical side and the organisational side. And the number of injuries that they've had has maybe been a result of trying to do that too much. And they're missing, Koke, I think, not playing at the weekend. He's such an important player for them in the pressing. He's good on the ball. He's a decent passer. He reads the game well, but one of his greatest strengths is the way he leads the pressing from midfield. And without him, they become much less effective defensively. So he was really missed, I thought, at the weekend. And they just don't have that balance between defence and attack as well. Diego Simeone obviously is known as, and rightly, as his teams, his Atletico teams have been based on defence. They've been based on not conceding. But their best team, especially the team that won the title, had that great balance coming forward, and they were always a threat coming forward. They don't quite have that. It's been really Griezmann or nothing. And they need to have a bit more of a rounded approach. And sometimes you feel that they just rely too heavily on the defence, which makes them easy to play against. So I think it's a combination of things, but definitely the ageing comes into it. And you wonder mentally as well whether they know they're not going to win the league. I think they've known that, even though they've been up there. They know their biggest chance is the Champions League, because you can win that to a smaller number of games. And as I mentioned, the motivation of hoping to win it at home. I just wonder whether mentally that is where their real focus is this season. So it'd be really interesting, this tie against Juventus. For me, it's the tie of the round. Can't wait to see how aggressive Juventus will be against them, whether Juventus try to play them at their own game or whether they try to dominate and dictate the terms of the game, how bold Atletico will be. Obviously, there's a Cristiano Ronaldo factor. It's going to be a really fascinating tie. And I think if Atletico get through it, they'll have as good a chance as anyone of winning the Champions League, despite what we've seen, the inconsistency we've seen from them in La Liga.
Right. Aaron, you're a Juventino. What are you making of going into this tie between these two, historically great teams, two of the finest teams of the era?
Yeah, I think this one will not be for the neutral, if we're going to be honest. These are two very pragmatic teams, two teams that always think defense first, especially it's Diego Simeone and Massimiliano Allegri. Like, those two guys go out there with the intention of protecting what they have first, and then everything else comes afterwards. So I think it's going to be a very tactical game. I'll enjoy it because I enjoy things like that, but I think the neutral might not quite enjoy it. And I think it is Atleti is an interesting case because I think they're kind of at the end of a cycle right now. They've got Diego Godin, who's been there for so long, who has been one of the best defenders in the world, if not the best defender in the world for a few years, but is now kind of, you see him declining a little bit. Jose Jimenez is a fantastic defender, but he's not quite at that level yet. Juan Fran used to be one of the best outside backs in the world, and now he's older, and you've got Santiago Arias, who's come in and is a very good player again. But I think what we're seeing with Atleti is a bunch of very good players coming in to replace players who were at the core, were world class. And right now, because Diego Simeone doesn't have the money to spend to buy these top players, I think they've done incredibly well scouting, but I don't quite think that they have the quality throughout that squad, as you mentioned before, that they did in past years. So while they are extremely dangerous still, I I don't think they're quite as dangerous as they were even last year. And Alvaro Morata is a hell of a player, but he's not a Diego Costa. He's not even a Mario Mandzukic who can fight, who Atleti have had in attack for them. Koke returning will be huge, but Atleti, I think, can beat Juventus, but they're not quite as strong as they have been in recent years. And I think also the toll of playing for a Diego Simeone team is showing for some of these guys that have been there for years with the way that his teams press and run day in and day out. Some of those guys look a little bit weary. Like you that's an incredibly hard way to play, especially if you've been in a Diego Simeone team for a while. So I think you're kind of seeing some of that this year. But again, going back to say, like, this is still Atletico Madrid and it's still Diego Simeone. So there's absolutely every reason in the world to be incredibly wary of this team at all times.
Yeah, Aaron,
Right.
sorry, could I jump back in? I think there's a good point you make about the players who've come in to replace the icons. And I think a big part of that is that because it's the end of a cycle and a regeneration, that they haven't had the time together either. Because how many games has Arias played at right back for Atletico?
Yeah.
You know, it's a few, not many. Morata just coming to the team. Lamar had half a season being in and out of the team. Rodri into the midfield looks like he's going to be a great player in the future, but he's not.
Still young and not quite there.
Exactly, and he didn't even get to start on Saturday. So they're still bedding down together, and they will need time together as the title winning teams that Simeone put together. They're based so much on collective organisation, understanding of each other's roles, knowing exactly who's going to do what and when. They're such a finely drilled machine. That's the way Simeone wants them to play. That can only come with time and playing together. So it might be that, you know, next year we see them stronger when these new players who've come in have had more time together and know how to get the best out of each other. So it may just be that it's too soon this year.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Well, if you guys don't feel like watching this tie, you can change the channel and watch the 14th place team in Germany take on Manchester City. Surely, I'm sure Sam would agree that's going to be a better tie than this one.
Yeah, well, if you like goals and that kind of thing, then yeah, maybe. But I mean, yeah, I can't add too much more than what you guys have said already. Atletico Juve is going to be fascinating, but it's not going to be for everyone, is it? But that doesn't mean it's not going to be a really interesting tie. And they're two teams that you could see easily in the final, especially this year when the traditional giants aren't that strong. So it's interesting that they're playing each other so soon. Yeah.
Yeah. So I fear for Atletico, to be honest. I think Juventus will be too strong, and I think they've got too many weapons. And Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously, has made the difference in this kind of game for a decade or more. And I think there's every chance he'll do again. I'd love Atletico to go all the way to the final and play in their own stadium in the final. But I just fear for them. I think Juve will have too much.
Right. I want to turn our attention now to an individual who has really caught the eye in the past month or so. And that individual is 18 years old and starting games for Real Madrid. Vinicius Jr., of course, came in from Flamengo and really, formed a dynamic partnership with Karim Benzema, who's playing some of his best football ever. And just, in really impressive first few games from a guy who has never played in Europe, still going to turn 19 in this summer. And I don't think any of us would have expected him, despite his enormous promise, to come in and do so well. So I guess my question is, is Vinicius the real deal?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's massively outperformed expectations for his first season. When he came in, the club built quite a lot of hype around him, this new great Brazilian starlet. And I think inevitably any attacking player from Brazil who's got a bit of flair to him is automatically hyped up by European fans, hoping that they might see the next Neymar, for example. And Vinicius, though, I thought the most we could have expected would that he'd play a few games from the bench and score the odd spectacular goal, maybe, and look like the player for the future. But he's really looking like he's capable of doing what Mbappe did a couple of years ago when he broke through, which is becoming a huge force on the European scene immediately, which is so rare. And the fact that he came in, Solari brought him in more or less straight away. That was more or less the first thing he did, was to bring in Vinicius, who he'd worked with in the B team, so he'd seen him close up. And the fact that he stayed in and started every game, I think he started 10 in a row and played more or less every minute. Yeah, he's been subbed off a few times, but to have taken on that responsibility of playing, starting for Real Madrid as an 18-year-old when they were in a slump, surrounded by talks of crisis, and the weakest Madrid team in years and so on, and to just take that on his shoulders and accept that responsibility and keep playing with confidence and trying things. It's incredible to see not just what he can do with the ball, but his attitude, the positive attitude he has. And I think that attitude, as much as the way he's actually played, has been infectious and played a huge part in the turnaround that we've seen at Real Madrid in the last few weeks, because that has been the chief thing that's changed for them, I think, is attitude. They've started to believe again that, hey, we're Real Madrid, we can beat anyone. And Vinicius has been a big part of that. So, yeah, he's the real deal as a player to watch out for the next 10 years or more, but he is for the next 10 weeks as well, because Real Madrid could win everything still. I don't think they'll win La Liga. I think they're too far behind. But Champions League, there's no way you can rule them out. And Vinicius has shown that it would be a surprise if he isn't a starter in the big games now, between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, I think what's impressed me most about Vinicius is you expect to see the skills, you expect to see the athleticism because you saw all that at Flamengo. But I think it is Flamengo. The surprise to me is the making. He in front of goal, a lot of times you see young players, especially with the skill that he has, make terrible decisions because they can't do anything with the ball. But his final ball, his eye for goal has been really, really beautiful to watch for me. And it is, as you said, Mbappe-esque. His directness and his composure in front of goal is something that you do not often see in an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old. And it's been a big surprise. I thought that he might be like a little bit of a sparkle this season. We might get to see a little bit out of him. But especially his decision-making has been a real breath of fresh air. And it's been so much fun to watch.
Yeah, there were two key moments. I was just thinking while you were talking in the first half of the derby on Saturday, and one of them was the kind of thing you maybe would have expected to see from him, and the other though wasn't. And there's been the most impressive thing about him. And the two things I'm talking about. The first one, actually, it was the other way around chronologically. But the thing that you would have expected from him was the way he beat the defender, drove into the box, and was challenged and won the penalty. That was the kind of thing you'd think, yeah, we might get that from him, that he'll take on a defender and run into the box. And obviously having that ability is great. But there was a moment that stood out for me even more a little earlier, where he got the ball on the left and he played this incredible pass with the outside of his right foot, an angled cross into the path of Lucas Vazquez, who made a real hash of it. I don't know if you remember the chance, and ended up volleying it well wide. But the vision he had to see that and to play that pass with the outside of his right foot, the confidence to try it, and the ability to pull it off, and the vision to even see it, was something that I was really impressed by, and that I don't think we could have expected him to do that kind of thing. But it also made me think, as an aside, Lucas Vazquez, I don't think he should stay in that team. If Gareth Bale had been on the receiving end of that chance, he probably would have scored it. Maybe Marco Asensio as well. Vazquez is a willing worker, but I think for Real Madrid to win the Champions League, they'll need the extra quality that either Asensio or Bale can give them on the other flank.
I mean, just looking at so many other 18-year-olds, it's very rare that, no matter how good they are, that they'll be starting every match, much less Real Madrid. Aaron, I know your boy Timothy Weah is starting to start games for Celtic, but looking at so many others, off the top of my head, Linus, Moise Kane, Hudson Odoi, these guys, Phil Foden, Sam, as he
yeah. Not in the squad yesterday.
Right. These guys are struggling to even get in the squad, and I think you got two kids and a few others who are starting at lower level teams, such as Benoit Badiashile at Monaco, Sandro Tonali in Italy's second division. But the two guys who really stand out and who you sort of get the sense are these two guys have got next are Jadon Sancho of Borussia Dortmund and Vinicius Jr. at Real Madrid, both just been lights out this season. And I would argue that they're both the real deal. Do you see Ballon d'Or potential in both of these guys?
Yeah, I'll take that one and say certainly for Vinicius, I'd say potentially. I mean, there's a long, long way to go. And, for every young star who's come through at that age and made it, someone like a Messi, for example, there's someone like a Balotelli who didn't fulfill the potential. We could have been saying this about Balotelli when he was 17, 18 and looking like a world beater and then didn't for various reasons. We don't need to go into that, but potential isn't always fulfilled. And I think we have to acknowledge that for all we've been building up Vinicius, it is really still potentially still only played 10 games. So what the future holds, we can't be sure. As much as we can, it looks like he's going to go on and have a wildly successful career. And it certainly looks like he's got the potential to be, as you say, a Ballon d'Or type candidate within the next 5 years.
Yeah, and with Sancho as well, the thing about him is he's just so fearless. And he's the best thing, because a lot of City fans now are saying if he'd have stayed around, he'd be in the team and he would have been a better option than Mahrez. But I mean, that's kind of by the by because he left the year before Mahrez and all of that kind of thing. But the main thing is he just wouldn't be in the team. He wouldn't be getting these opportunities because, frankly, at the moment, he's not as good as Sane and Sterling. And that's the level and that's the problem City have got. And that's the thing with Foden as well. He's not as good, not just as David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. He's not as good as Bernardo Silva or even Ilkay Gundogan. And when Guardiola knows he's going to be judged on winning games and he thinks the better players are the better options to win a game. But Sancho, he's got none of those problems now at Dortmund. He's been given that platform to go and show exactly what he can do. And he's fearless. And I'm sure he'll want to come back to the Premier League at some point just to kind of prove, because for one thing, City wouldn't let him go to another Premier League club when it came to selling him. They would only sell him abroad, but there's nothing to stop Dortmund doing that. And I think the fact with Brahim Diaz, they put in that weird contract clause in where City get 40% of the fee if he goes to United in future. I think they might be worried that Sancho might go to a club like United and go and make his name there. So, yeah, Ballon d'Or wise, I think he's got the ability. He's also getting the chances at the moment, which is so huge for an 18-year-old. But also, I think he's kind of got that determination just to show the world and, just to show people that he's better than they think and just to prove people wrong. And I think if you've got that mentality allied to the ability and the opportunity, then you can go a long way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I want to turn my attention now to a player who's on the other side of the spectrum, who's perhaps more considered declining than a prospect. Gareth Bale.
Yeah.
Now, Gareth Bale, he scored his 100th goal for Real Madrid this weekend. Great milestone for him. It's always seemed like his career in Madrid has sort of had a dark cloud over it, as if he was, they overpaid for him, paying his wages are way too high. This question's for everybody on the panel. What do you think people will remember from Gareth Bale's time at Real Madrid? Do you think it was a good move for him? Do you think he succeeded?
I think everyone's going to remember the Champions League final now. I think that came at a great time, because before that, and look, I'm not as up on Spanish football as I used to be, man. Keeping up to date with City on a day-to-day basis is enough. But I think the general opinion on Bale, and it will be even after the final, was that it's ultimately not worked out for one reason or another, and basically the injuries. Because you can point to all the goals and you can point to some of the moments, and they have been great. But I just think the expectation being what it is at Madrid, and the contribution overall, it just hasn't quite clicked. But I think what will be remembered most, and what is the obvious counterpoint to that, is that Champions League final, because that was, I mean, it was an incredible game in its own right. There was so many mad moments without Bale's contribution, but that overhead kick is such an iconic goal. It's up there with Zidane's against the Leverkusen, and that'll be what he's remembered for. But I think overall, and especially in Spain, I don't think he'll be remembered as a great signing, which might be harsh if you look at like say 100 goals for the club. But I just think with the injuries and him not being there when needed, I just don't think it's quite lived up to what it could have been.
Yeah, that's. I think that's probably the assessment I'd go along with. I think I'd say he will be remembered by Real Madrid as a good signing and a good player, but not a great one, not one of the all-time best. A player that just about lived up to expectations. He's been let down by injury, for sure. And I think there's two big things that count against him when he's being judged, as every Real Madrid player is judged and has to be judged. Firstly, there's the injuries, that you can't trust him to play more than 5 or 6 games before he goes down and has to have a month out. And secondly, and it shouldn't be this way because it's got nothing to do with the way he actually plays, but it's his lack of engagement. He sometimes seems like a robot. He sometimes seems that he's just emotionally going through the motions. There's no engagement with his teammates, the fans. He doesn't seem to be embedded in Spanish culture. It's like he's living apart and floating down to play football and then leaving the scene again. He doesn't seem to be part of La Liga in a way, which is a strange thing for someone who's been there for so long now. And I think he doesn't help himself in that respect. How hard would it be for him to record the odd video where he's talking for 5 seconds in Spanish and smiling? He just doesn't do that thing. How hard would it be for him to do a very brief mix zone appearance every now and then in Spanish, or to engage with his teammates more publicly? And I just don't think he helps himself. And we shouldn't judge his football on that, because it's quite apart from what he actually does on the pitch. But it does come into the way people perceive him. And certainly when maybe I'm using too strong a word here, but there is a bit of an element of racism within mainstream Spanish society, that if you're not Spanish, you've got a lot harder work to prove yourself. So I think he's been a good signing, but not a great one. And even the 100 goals thing, okay, yeah, of course, it's nice to score 100 goals for Real Madrid. That's good. But you know what? In the time he's been there, he's done that. Lionel Messi scored 300 goals for Barcelona. And of course, you can't compare anyone to Messi. But if you're a starter, the most expensive player at Real Madrid, an established superstar at Real Madrid, you've got to be some way comparable to the strongest player at your biggest rivals. And the fact that he's scored 100 goals, it's okay, but it's not amazing for considering how long he's been there. So yes, he's been good, but not an all-time great at Real Madrid.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I actually really want to echo. That was going to be one of my biggest points with Bale. Is I think the public views him as an extraño, an outsider. He has been there for 5 years and doesn't speak the language in Spain. Spain typically expects you to settle into their culture, at least to speak the language decently, to make an effort of it. Even David Beckham, when he went over, you'd see him smiling, speaking in bad Spanish. And I think that really, really endeared him to the press, to the fans. Even playing at the peak of his ability, he still was appreciated because he gave an effort. And when Bale's hurt and when you see him just disappear, like you don't see him in the public eye, you don't see anything, you don't see him engage with the press, you just see the 100 million pound signing sitting on the bench. I think a lot of people view that really poorly, and it takes away from the fact that he scored 100 goals. But I really, really think the fact that he has made almost from the outside zero effort to settle into Spanish society really, really hurts his legacy in the country.
Yeah, and I think that's the same anyway. You know, we're maybe pointing fingers at Spain and saying people in Spain expect this, expect that. It's the same anyway. If you talk about a player coming to England, you would want him to adapt to English culture and so on. And the interesting thing about all this is that it might not be true. He might be a bundle of laughs with his teammate. He might speak Spanish every day to the people behind the scenes at the club. We don't know because we're not privy to that. But he doesn't give that impression. He gives the impression of being a bit cold and aloof. And even, you know, I noticed on Saturday, the team win the local derby at Atletico. He scored a goal, a milestone goal for him. Final whistle, he marches on his own straight down the tunnel. And the rest of the team are out there in the centre circle celebrating. He's off on his own. And that, you know, that image speaks 1,000 words, as they say. And it may be unfair, but that's the way he comes across.
Just trying to picture Bale speaking Spanish. Like the Torres Nike ad from I think 2007 comes to mind, where you got the Liverpool guys learning Spanish to cheer on Spanish, and they've got the Liverpool accent like "Vamos chicos, yeah." I will add though that, you know, having lived in Madrid, even if you speak decent Spanish, they will find a way to tear into you, whether it's by using Mexican Spanish. You know, you say a Mexican or, you know, Boricua version of Spanish like ahorita, and they're like, no se dice ahorita. And so I feel for Bale. I hope that he does manage to learn some Spanish in the time remaining, because it's a beautiful language, and he really does deserve to be respected more. And I do think that there is an element of xenophobia to what you said, Andy, that, you know, we can't. I mean, I think that every single player on Real Madrid, besides Bale, if I'm not mistaken, speaks Spanish. I believe Cruz speaks Spanish. I know Modric speaks very good Spanish. Pretty sure Bale is the only one who is sort of singled out, and it certainly doesn't help when you're the most expensive player in club history.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's, you know, let's be fair to him. He's not done badly at all. He's won, 4 Champions Leagues, isn't it? And he's played a big role in some of those finals. He scored in the first final, the victory over Atletico. He scored the incredible goal last year, and he's provided a lot more highlight moments. And when he's been fit, he has at times looked like one of the best players in the world, but he's not done that consistently enough because of the injuries. And, you know, we'll see how long he lasts there. Whether he's there next season, we don't know. There's going to be a turnaround in players. Obviously, Eden Hazard will arrive, it looks like. If Bale survives that into the next phase, he may go on to enjoy a lot more achievements with the club, and then that perception will change. But the way it is for now, I think it's a 7 out of 10 kind of stay. It's certainly not a failure, but not a complete runaway success.
Lovely stuff. Well, I'm back now. I've sorted the dog out. We're moving on to England now. So I think that's you done, Andy, isn't it? You got busy evening?
Yeah, have to move on. But thank you very much for having me, guys, and good luck with this venture. It's a really good one, and I'm sure you're going to produce a lot of great content for people to listen to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy.
Great job.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Lovely stuff. Right, I'll edit that silence out. Right, we'll move on to England now. A bit more of your area of expertise, Sam.
I'm all right with Bale. When I saw he got that shirt with 100 goalies written on the back, I thought you're gonna have to get him one in English as well that you can understand. But yeah, I'm all right with Spanish football. And despite that pronunciation of goalies, then my Spanish is decent as well when I get in the flow. But I'm not gonna crack it out now.
And Aaron
is better than Bale's anyway, man.
Yeah, Aaron is improving in his Spanish this year. I know you're trying to get better, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to my original level of fluency. I was actually a Spanish major, so now I'm trying to
nice. At Davidson, nonetheless, unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, Premier League, Manchester City took on a stuttering Chelsea side who hope to be reinvigorated by that signing of Higuain, and that stuttering turned into a full-blown capitulation. And City thumped them 6-0. we spoke about this a little bit before we started recording. People will criticise Sarri and that Chelsea team, and that's probably taken the headlines. But Sam, how good were Man City?
Well, yeah, they did everything they needed to do. You know, they started the game incredibly quickly, as they always do, but especially recently. You know, the amount of goals they get in the first 15 minutes. I think, is it 16 now they've got, and the second highest team's got 7 or 8, something like that. So that goes to show the gulf in that. But I mean, yesterday was just one of those days where basically everything City tried came off. You know, they've put in probably better performances than that, where, you know, they've just not had some of the luck with the finishing. And it's mad that we can say that with the open goal that Aguero missed. But that was, you know, that would have been 2-0, and, you know, the way Guardiola reacted by throwing himself on the ground. He and a lot of people also in the Etihad probably thought, oh, we've seen this before from City. They might not take their chances, and, you know, the game could go another way. But it just turned out that everything they hit just ended up going in. The Gundogan shot, you know, Kepa probably could have saved that on another day. The Aguero shot, which was probably through anger and embarrassment, that went in the top corner. I mean, how often is that actually going to go in? If he hadn't have missed the first one, he wouldn't have even tried it. And then the Ross Barkley header that put Aguero in for the second one, that's just a weird mistake. Everything was going really well for City, but, you know, they're going to play again in a couple of weeks in the Carabao Cup final. I'm not sure. Oh, maybe it will. Maybe it's going to be exactly the same, but I'm not sure it's going to be exactly how it was yesterday. There were 20 minutes in the second half when, look, fine, City were 4-0 up. So what do you want from them, really? But Chelsea looked pretty good then. You know, they couldn't. Well, they wouldn't let City play out. City barely got out of their own half, and the good thing that City did in terms of the pressing and finding the right spaces and stopping Chelsea from playing out, they did all of that, and that's why they got their rewards. And ultimately, that was why the scoreline was so big. But just as much of a part of it was just one of those days where everything went City's way, and like nothing went Chelsea's way at all, because Chelsea had a couple of chances to get 1 or 2 goals before half time. I'm not saying it would have been too much different in the second half, but I don't know. I'm not sure it was a 6-0 game. It was just really, really ruthless from City. But they did the same kind of stuff they so often do.
And part of that ruthless streak has been Aguero in recent weeks, hasn't it? He has been probably in some of the best form I think I can remember him being in for a long, long time. He equalled Alan Shearer's hat-trick record in the Premier League. I'll open this up to everyone because I'm sure everyone will have an opinion on this. Where do we put Aguero in the list of great Premier League strikers? Because he's got to be up there with your Shearer and Henry's, isn't he?
Yeah, I think that Aguero has to be considered amongst the finest. I would say he's, as far as Premier League goes, and probably career as well, he's surpassed, you know, Robin van Persie and Fernando Torres a long time ago. So I'm trying to think of players who are above him. I think really only Henry, Shearer, perhaps, maybe Rooney. I'm not totally sure. But, you know, I think he's certainly, I would put him in the top 5. You know, Sam, you cover City and you are also a United fan. Where would you put Aguero in this?
In the all-time list, well, I mean, in terms of numbers, I think by the time he leaves City, he's going to be 3rd on the all-time Premier League scorers list, because he only needs about 25, maybe less now after yesterday. And, you know, he'll get that in the next couple of seasons that he's at City, I'm sure. So, I mean, in terms of cold hard numbers, when he leaves, it's going to be Shearer at the top, and then Rooney, and then I think Aguero. I always think when it comes to English football and like rating forwards, I think we always like players who are a bit more explosive. You know, Shearer's got his mantle because he was just scored an incredible amount of goals. Like, Aguero could play for another 10 years in England, and I don't think he'll get near it. And I don't know how Shearer did it. You know, it just a ridiculous amount of goals. He was an absolute machine. But when it comes down to the rest, I always think Henry's going to have that edge. Maybe a bit of nostalgia as well because of the Arsenal team and what they achieved and how they achieved it. But also, I just think when it comes to the top forward players in England, everyone likes them to have that little bit extra, the X factor, scoring goals from outside the box, beating players, going on long dribbles and scoring. And I think Henry will always have that edge over Aguero because he's another penalty box player, but he doesn't have the goals that Shearer does. He's got a lot of goals, but not quite that amount. So I think, yeah, you were saying top five. Again, Rooney is a player who had that X factor as well. I'd say top five is probably fair, but I think Shearer, because of the ridiculous amount of goals, he's always going to be top three. Henry is always going to be top three, and I think Rooney will be as well. And then you've got fighting over the rest. And given Aguero's quality and his goals, yeah, I think top five's fair. I just don't think there's that X factor or nostalgia that kind of gets him near the other three.
Yeah, I still have Thierry Henry as my best ever Premier League striker for the ability to just pull.
And he just seemed unstoppable for 5 years.
For so long. He had the numbers. He scored, I think, 170-something goals in the Prem. He scored at an absurd rate, if you're talking about goals for games. He had that ability to just produce anything magical out of nothing. I'm making this about Henry when it's supposed to be Aguero. Now I'm just going down it anyway. But I would absolutely put Aguero in the top five. I think maybe I would have him at the moment. But I have him behind Henry, behind Shearer, maybe behind. I want it to be Wayne Rooney. But I think I might have him at 4, and I'm also insanely biased. I have Dennis Bergkamp at number 5 for best ever Premier League striker. So I'll let Aguero sit at 4.
Yeah, I think the Rooney debate is a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think Rooney suffers from off the field reputation, whereas Aguero doesn't have any off the field reputation, does he? Apart from that one time. Apart from that one time in the taxi in Amsterdam, was it? I mean,
yeah,
he's never in the newspapers, I think, and that might be detrimental to him as well because he's not a superstar.
It's funny because talking about Bale earlier and saying, it's the same in every league. If a player doesn't really learn the language, then people get a bit annoyed. But ultimately, I was going to jump in with Aguero, but I thought it'll probably come up in this bit. Aguero still barely speaks English. But nobody cares. Absolutely nobody cares at City.
I was going to say that about
he just scores so many goals.
He just banged goals.
Yeah, if you perform and he obviously gets on with his teammates. He's obviously a big character in the dressing room. There was the whole kind of thing about Guardiola maybe wanting to sell him if he didn't shape up when Guardiola first came in. But he responded to that challenge as well. And he's playing better football than ever, a more rounded game, but also still scoring the goals. There's never really been any questions about his mentality whatsoever. And as you said, away from the pitch, there's never any controversy. He's kind of flirted with leaking clubs to the press for a couple of times, but nothing really major. And for so long, everyone kind of just thought he's going to go to Real Madrid at some point, and he just never did. And again, talking about what it takes to be one of the best ever Premier League players, you just don't expect. Well, there's so few foreign players who have come to England and stayed for the best years of their career, and really become beloved at the club. And even for a South American player to settle in Manchester for so long and just get his head down, stay at home, lead a calm life, laid back, and just go on the pitch and consistently do it, and very rarely cause any problems behind the scenes. That is definitely a factor as well. So yeah, in terms of being off the pitch, he's just. I mean, he could have probably done a few more English classes with his free time, but no one's complaining at all because he does it. Although there is a kind of weird thing if you look at it. I think he's got 3 goals away from home in the Premier League this season and 14 at home. And last year, I think he got 6 away from home, and he scored 21 overall. And then the last one away from home last season was before Christmas. So if you look at 18 months worth of Premier League football, he hasn't scored an awful lot of goals away from home in the Premier League. It's a weird one. And especially when you look at it now, he's got 2 hat-tricks in the last 2 home games against teams like Chelsea and Arsenal. It's a bit odd, but he obviously scores that many, nobody really notices or cares.
It's a sign of class, isn't it, when no one makes a fuss about doing something, well, most people dream of.
Yeah. And also, it would be sacrilegious as well for anyone to really have a go at Aguero, especially now. But I think I might try it later in the week. Not have a go, but just at least talk about this away from home thing, because it's a bit odd. And, City are in a proper title race, aren't they? So they could probably do with a few more.
That's very true.
I think you could make the argument, because it seems to be Aguero versus Rooney for Moses. I think you can make the argument perhaps Rooney better overall career because of Champions League and so on, but perhaps Aguero has the better domestic record. But I think that one of the things that goes against Aguero's record is the Champions League, and he definitely has the potential to change that this season.
Yeah. Well, the next round is kind of similar to Basel last year. I think City should get to the next round, but look how quickly things can change from one round to the next. It was Liverpool last year, and that was all over pretty quickly. And I could see something similar happening this year as well, which I guess we'll get to later on.
Yes, and we spoke about Chelsea at the beginning of this. Sarri did a decent job at Napoli without actually winning anything, which some people I think do forget. But it didn't happen overnight building that team. And Chelsea, we've seen somewhat of a basket case club when it comes to managers. Aaron, do you think Sarri is at any risk of losing his job in the imminent future?
I think if continue to trend downwards, and if he doesn't show any sign of flexibility, which could portend badly for him because he's not the most flexible coach. I honestly think they'll right the ship and they'll be okay through the end of the season, and I think they'll give him through the summer and into next year to get some players in to be able to play in the manner that he wants his teams to play. But I think the biggest issue with Sarri's teams is that he places a lot of trust in his system, and it's all about the system. If players don't fit into that system, he doesn't really have a plan B, and he doesn't really change his tactics to fit the opposition. He doesn't change his tactics to fit the players that he has at his disposal. And right now, he doesn't have the players at his disposal that really fit his system. So I think he's going to struggle. I would say that he'll be fine through the end of the season, but this is Chelsea, and I could see if a couple more results go against them deciding to cut ties. But I do think he's probably safe. But again, it's Chelsea.
If he does go, and I think this is becoming an increasingly big issue for the elite clubs around the world. I mean, Manchester United have just gone through it. If you get rid of the manager, who'd you bring in? I mean, United were very, very lucky with Solskjaer, the way it's gone. But is there anyone out there that you could see turning Chelsea around?
Oh,
Frank Lampard.
Yeah, that's kind of the vogue, isn't it? I mean, what's the chances of Simeone leaving Atletico at any point? Because it seems to be, if Chelsea go right, the Sarri thing's not worked. It seems to be a lot of it based in the fact that it's a new style of football, and Chelsea are used to, kind of playing Mourinho, Conte football, where it's not especially expansive, but it gets a job done. And I wonder if Simeone would be the logical step.
Is he not earmarked for Inter Milan? I don't know.
Yeah,
he's a little bit iffy, isn't he?
Yeah, but who knows with Chelsea? Chelsea are a bit like Real Madrid. They've kind of done the merry-go-round. They've got through everyone, and they kind of need to start again. So if Simeone is available, I can imagine they would go for it. I suppose it just depends on how much Abramovich cares now. And if you look at some of the transfers in recent years, I know they just bought Pulisic, but with Drinkwater and some of the players they have bought in, and some of the players they targeted but not got, you kind of think, which direction are they really going in here? So I suppose it depends.
Especially when youth players are wanting to leave to better their careers. I think it speaks volumes of the feeling around the club at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it does. But Chelsea have got the similar. Well, Chelsea have got less of that kind of problem with City because with City at least they got Sterling and Sane, but with Hudson-Odoi they kind of had a bit of an opportunity recently with Willian and Pedro not really playing that well. It's just kind of like just give them a go and see. But yeah, I mean things aren't great there at the minute, and I completely agree. I do think that surely he'll get to the end of the season and probably the summer as well. But again, if the League Cup final goes badly, and they got Spurs next as well, as we were saying before the show, it could be a rough February.
Yeah, we'll move on to Italy.
Can I just say before, I think that the squad thing is a bit overstated. Sorry. I mean, I know that, he's very set in his ways and he can play great football when he's on it. But I really don't think that he is as bad of a bench as a lot of people make it out to be. The fact is, he barely rotated at Napoli. He barely rotates now. And he doesn't have terrible players on either bench. At Napoli, we saw he had Amadou Diawara, Milik, can't pronounce his first name, and Maksimovic, Unas, Marco Rogue, Zielinski, quality players here. Chelsea, again, a poor, somewhat of a poor squad, but I'm sorry, you can't tell me that Marcos Alonso is a better player than Emerson. You can't tell me that Willian or Pedro are better players than Calum Hudson-Odoi. And I really don't like the fact that, just because Pedro and Willian have played in the Champions League and are, past 30, they'll win you games. What do you mean? Where have we seen Pedro or Willian do something this season that Hudson-Odoi isn't capable of? So I really don't think that the squad vulnerabilities or per se, Sarri's board not spending as much money as he needs to. I think those issues are sort of overstated. Fact is, we just saw Chelsea's board just spent 60 million on Jorginho plus incredible wages, and they bought the most expensive goalkeeper of all time. Now, only 2 players, but when you add in Kovacic and so on, I really don't think that this is such a poor squad. I think that the criticism of Sarri might be overstated, but top coaches know how to find a backup plan. They know how to change things up. I'm sorry, frankly, for all of the good that he's done at Chelsea and Napoli, he has proven unable of doing that.
Yeah, it's a tough time, and it's definitely one to keep an eye on, because if anything, it's fun watching Chelsea fans go into meltdown. We'll go on to Italy. Juventus are a machine that seemingly cannot be stopped. And despite conceding a fair amount of goals in recent weeks, they eased past Sassuolo 3-0. Aaron, were Juventus good value for that win?
I think they got a little bit lucky early. If Sassuolo had taken a couple of the chances that were on offer, it could have been a very, very different match. And I think we've kind of seen that a little bit from Juve this year. A couple lucky bounces, and then opponents don't take their chances, and Juve goes on to grind it out. I've actually not been super impressed by Juventus this year, especially as a supporter. I think too often they're willing to see the initiative to teams and kind of sit in, especially if they do get an early goal. We'll start pretty energetically and then get that early goal and then kind of let off the gas. But it was a strong win. They were able to pull it out in the end and continue to grind out the results that they have been. But again, I've not been super impressed with Juve, and that Atletico tie is a little bit worrying, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think moment of the match has got to be Ronaldo smashing the ball into Emre Can. Was it Emre Can? He's beating the face with the ball.
I think it might have been.
I mean, come on. Putting club rivalry.
No. I think it was Khedira.
Was it Khedira? Oh, that's a perfect little lead into the next question, isn't it?
Oh, it was Khedira.
Yeah. Because I know, because the entire Juventus fan base celebrated when he did that, when they thought that he was about to give Khedira CTE and he'd be out for the rest of the season.
To him too. I remember that. Yeah.
It's funny because they're ex-teammates of Madrid too.
That's so good.
That's a perfect segue into the next one. I thought Khedira didn't have his worst game, and he continues to contribute despite being, as you've just alluded to, his quality questioned by Juventus fans. With Aaron Ramsey, who has just been granted apparently a 400 grand a week contract, is Khedira's time over at Juventus?
I think he's still got probably I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave this summer, but I think Khedira still has something to offer. I just don't think it should. Sami Khedira, it's funny because like from almost the moment he got to Juve, a lot of people panned the signing. A lot of people viewed it as a poor addition to the squad because he was on the tail end of his career. He's never been the you would call the most dynamic of players. All the kind of legs have gone a little bit, but Khedira is one of the smartest players in the game still, and his in-game intelligence is what makes him so valuable. So I think even I again, he shouldn't be a starter. He shouldn't be a starter this year either, which is I think the frustration that comes from Juve fans is the fact that he's not good enough to be a starter. He is absolutely good enough to be a contributor and a regular contributor, but in a Champions League winning team right now, Sami Khedira is not good enough to be a starter. So that's probably, I think that's where the frustration comes, that he is a starter when he's healthy. He is first choice, and Allegri loves him because of his intelligence, but he is not, right now, he doesn't offer enough for what would be a Champions League winning side, in my opinion. I think Juve have for the last year or two needed a third midfielder to play alongside Matuidi and Pjanic. I think Rodrigo Bentancur has a lot of potential and will be probably good enough to play in a Champions League winning team in the next 2 years or so, but he's not quite there yet. Sami Khedira is not at that level anymore. And I think that third was needed, and I think the Juventus fan base, that's why there's a lot of frustration towards Khedira, because he's the player that's been chosen to occupy that third spot. But again, I think he has a lot to offer.
Yeah, and as we alluded to just a minute ago, we've seen a lot of Aaron Ramsey in the Premier League, and he's probably been underappreciated, I guess, by Arsenal fans over the past few years. Sam, what do you make of this move? Apparently, 400 grand a week. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's come from David Ornstein, who is like God for Arsenal fans. But Gabriel Marcotti's saying 250 grand, which is still a lot. So I guess it's one of those where we see it with transfers all the time. You know, the selling club says one side, oh, we couldn't match this, it was 400 grand. And then you've got Juve going, oh, no, we wouldn't pay that kind of money. That's ridiculous. And it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's just the way that they report in England. In England, I think they report it pre-tax, and in Italy they report it post-tax. So it's probably
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's just how it's reported. So it would be like the equivalent of about like a 250K a week salary in England.
Okay,
which is
that makes
second
sense.
highest after Cristiano Ronaldo, I believe.
At Juve, yeah.
That's still a lot for Aaron Ramsey, isn't it? Because he was never going to command that at Arsenal, was he?
Yeah, it's a lot, and it would be too much if anyone had paid a transfer fee for him. But I think in Juve's view, because he's a free transfer, that money would have that could be like a 15-20 million transfer fee, and then giving him like 150, 120, then would look at as, oh, that's normal. But instead, I think they felt it was worth it to hand him a higher salary. And because they don't have the transfer fee, which it's still on the numbers, on the face of it, it looks like a lot, because it is a lot. But then I think it's just that kind of the way you view a transfer, because the money's going to come out of your pocket either way. You would have had to buy a midfielder that caliber, pay a transfer fee, and pay him. So I think they kind of just view it as, hey, we're not paying this, so we'll just give it directly to him.
I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often with footballers, because look how much extra they can get. Like Alexis Sanchez is. You know, his transfer last year, obviously United had to pay a bit to Arsenal to kind of free it up, and Mkhitaryan went as well, but he got so much money from exactly that kind of scenario. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often, to be honest. But with Ramsey going to Juve, he's going to have to deliver.
Precedent in the squads, especially if a player comes in as earning, maybe didn't cost anything in transfer fee, but is earning $750,000 a week, and you're sitting beside a teammate who's earning $50,000 a week. I think it would probably maybe create some problems.
Yeah. To be fair, that's what City are trying to avoid. You know, we could talk about City's finances all day, but they are pretty much trying to avoid that. And with like Frankie De Jong and the kind of stuff he's getting at Barca, if he were to go in straight away on more than what Sterling's getting, and Sterling signed a contract like 2 months ago, then that would cause problems. So yeah. But not all clubs will run as well as that, I guess. And I suppose Ramsey's going to have to deliver and show he's worth that as soon as he rocks up at Juventus, because in terms of the pecking order, he's second only to Ronaldo. And obviously no one's going to question what Ronaldo gets paid, but Aaron Ramsey is a different story. He's not Ronaldo.
Especially when you look at the options Juventus have. I mean, you've got Matuidi, Khedira, Emre Can, who is kind of growing into his role at Juventus, I guess. Dybala obviously wants to play in that side. I mean, Aaron, do you have any idea what place he's going to take?
I think as it stands right now, he would be that third midfielder alongside Matuidi and Pjanic, with, depending on how Allegri deploys them, front three with Ronaldo, Mandzukic, Dybala, any of the three of Ronaldo, Mandzukic, Dybala, Bernardeschi, Cuadrado. I think he would be probably the starter right now, unless they sign another. I think the plan is probably to sign another midfielder in addition, and then maybe let one of the ones go that are in the fold now. But I do think he'd probably be that third midfielder alongside Pjanic and Matuidi.
Well, we shall see. It's interesting. I'm interested in it just for my FIFA Ultimate Team purposes. Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey make a lovely little link between Italy and Spain.
I like that. I like that idea. It's a nice strong link for Ultimate Team.
We'll go on to the Champions League then, because that's coming up this week. It feels like forever since the group stage is finished. It's too long.
It's been so long.
We've got some massive ties: Atletico Madrid versus Juventus, which we've touched on already. Manchester United PSG is all the makings for an absolute classic. And Sam, will come to you to talk about Manchester City and Guardiola, because his ultimate goal is to win this trophy, isn't it? And it's the be all and end all for him. I think you've already said you don't think they're going to win it this season. And what is it that's stopping them? It cannot be squad quality, can it?
No, but this is it. Like it can't be, and it shouldn't be squad quality, because it's not so much the money, but it's the fact that money has gone towards such good players. They've not just been spending on ridiculous signings that don't make sense. All the signings make sense. Mahrez is not going through a good time at the moment, but the signing made sense, and I'm sure he'll show his quality at some point. But I mean, we're talking about like that. That's a sub there. Look at the players that are starting. Sane's not started a couple of games against Arsenal and Chelsea, and like nobody's missed him. So that's kind of paints the picture of how good they are. Don't really need to go into too much of that further, but it's just this thing, like, it's the Lyon games that stick in my mind, and the way that Lyon played against them, kind of fearless, a lot of attacking players. At one point in the away game at Lyon, they had 5 men across the front line just pinning City back. They couldn't build up. City couldn't build up how they usually like to, and they couldn't even kind of set up defensively. They couldn't commit as many men forward either, because they needed to actually think about the opposition for a change. I mean, obviously they work out their tactics and their pressing patterns and their triggers based on what the opponents do, but they very rarely need to actually. Well, their game is very rarely inhibited by what the opponents are actually doing in an attacking sense. But it was against Lyon, and Lyon are a really good side, and they were really good in terms of that culture clash and clash of styles against City. But there's so many teams in Europe who are better than Lyon and will also play their own game, and will also attack City, and will also give them stuff to worry about. And Borussia Dortmund are one side that could do that. That's without even mentioning the biggest teams around Europe who have got that kind of know-how when it comes to winning the Champions League, and the expectancy to win, and the kind of mentality that runs through the whole club, like Bayern and Barca and Madrid, and to a lesser extent Juve. So maybe I'm reading too much into that Lyon game, but basically any team that gets in City's faces and can stop them from building up and can block off the passing lanes. And I'm thinking just Newcastle. Newcastle did it like less than 2 weeks ago. But then are capable of breaking and have quality on the attack as well, which obviously Newcastle didn't have, but they still had enough for for the 2 goals. And then when it got to that game at St James's Park, when City had time left to construct their attacks and have a bit of an onslaught and try and get back into the game, they just didn't really have it. And it's kind of like whenever the plan's working for City, it's absolutely fine. We talked about it yesterday against Chelsea. The plan, everything worked perfectly. They did what they needed to do, and they were 4 goals up in 25 minutes. Great. But on the rare occasions when it doesn't go to plan, I think they can look a little bit shell-shocked, and I think that's happened against Liverpool. It happened against United last season. Over Christmas when they lost against Palace and Leicester, there wasn't really that sense of inevitability that, City are losing, but they're going to attack, they're going to use the ball well, they're going to use all of their quality forward players to get back into it. They just look shell-shocked. And I think if you throw all that into the mix in the Champions League, they could have problems. And again, even with the Chelsea game yesterday, Chelsea could have scored a couple of goals before half time, and ultimately it doesn't matter. But Guardiola is gearing everything towards the Champions League. If you watch that Amazon documentary where they drew at Burnley, the whole team talk was about, look, you need to score the goals, because the league didn't matter at that point. They were already 15 points or so clear, but it was all about the Champions League, and it's all about the Champions League again. And if you invite a team onto you or let a team play their own game for 20 minutes in the Champions League, they can score a couple of goals, and that can change the whole complexion of the tie, which we saw when they played Monaco 2 or 3 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, City have got the quality. They've got a plan that can win it, but I just think there are vulnerabilities in that squad, and it's the kind of vulnerabilities that only really get found out at the top level, and of course that is the Champions League.
Yeah, it sounds like they suffer a bit of what PSG suffer from, which is they find a lot of the league games relatively easy, and it's hard to kind of get back up to 100% and battle against that elite level of player that you're going to come up against in the Champions League. Because no disrespect to the rest of the Premier League, I mean, I'm a Southampton fan. Our players are not a patch on those at Man City, and they're not a patch on anyone else in the top 6. And it kind of gears towards the argument for a European Super League, doesn't it? As much as it pains me to say that.
Well, City, they've got to dig in and they've got to fight, and it's not easy and it's physical. But yeah, like I say, they've got the plan, and they're told, when the centre back moves out this way with the ball, you go and press him that way. He'll give it into Fernandinho. Fernandinho can get it. You can break. You'll score, and that'll probably happen. And the amount of times they must go onto the pitch and exactly what Guardiola tells them will happen does happen. And then when that doesn't happen, that is the problem, and it very rarely comes to pass in the Premier League. So, yeah, I mean, the whole PSG thing is kind of based around the fact that it's just so easy for them. And yeah, I mean, maybe the Premier League is too easy for City, but then look at it with Liverpool. Liverpool are right up there as well. So I don't know. I mean, in terms of competitiveness, City know they're in a battle every week. So maybe that won't be such a factor this season, because PSG now they're miles clear as they usually are. But at least City are kind of, there's no room for complacency. They know they need to go into every game and win it. But I definitely know what you mean about basically it's just knowing how to react. It's the old boxing thing. If everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and I think that's kind of what the situation is with City. They very rarely get punched, but when they do, they can struggle to deal with it.
Yeah, and talking of PSG. Manchester United next. When the draw was made, everyone kind of went, PSG are through then, but so much has changed between then and now. Solskjaer's come in, Man United are on fire. PSG have suffered many, many injuries. Zach, I'll bring you in on this one. How do you see this one panning out? Because it's all to play for at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is all to play for. And with regards to Sam's point, I really don't think that any of the sides are any of the sides look incredibly invincible. I think that each team has their weaknesses. I think that with regards to PSG United, it's funny because if you'd asked me, if you would ask anybody 2 months ago when the draw was announced, and they told you, "Oh, I think United is going to go through," you would have smacked them. I mean, no,
no, I agree.
I mean, looking back, just 2 months ago, PSG were undefeated in the league, and I think they were probably undefeated domestically. In fact, I'm not sure if PSG had even drawn a match when the draw was announced. And yet we look now, just lost to Lyon. They've had some tough games against normally easy opposition like Nantes and Bordeaux just this past week. Seeing a lot of disconcerting injuries with Edinson Cavani, Marco Verratti, both look like they'll be look like they won't be starting tomorrow. Of course, Neymar is out. Honestly, I think United are going to go through. I gotta say this Solskjaer team, I believe the hype, and it's not just hype anymore because they've been doing it since December, and they've been solid and consistent. They're playing some very good football, and it's just it tickles you a bit because you forget after so much of the malaise of Mourinho, you forget that these are actually good players. I can't believe how well Ander Herrera, for example, is doing. He's been just great in midfield. Matic, another one, and of course Pogba. And Pogba was, he's a good player even during Mourinho. But now, I mean, I don't think there's been a better midfielder in England, maybe even in Europe, since Solskjaer took over than Paul Pogba. I mean, and then you just have to look at that front line. Marcus Rashford, what an impact Solskjaer has had. Anthony Martial, really everything's clicking on all cylinders, and I think that you have to consider United as a contender for the Champions League. Honestly, PSG on the other hand, just looking at that potential lineup, Tuchel knows what he's doing. He's a good coach, and I think that you have to trust his judgment. But I just think, United, they've just got this flair and this groove going about them. That's why I'm backing United to go through.
Yeah, and PSG have always got this. Well, the games against Barca, obviously when they thrashed Barca in the first leg a couple of years ago and then just absolutely bottled it, just played such miserable football in the second leg and they were asking for trouble and they got it. But even like when they came close to knocking out Barca years ago when they had Ancelotti as manager and Messi came off the bench for like the last 15 minutes. He was kind of injured, but just had enough Messi quality to do it. And PSG kind of crap their pants again. And I just think they're not there. We talk about City not quite being there when it comes to top level European football. PSG just aren't there. And I think when the going gets tough over two legs, they don't inspire any confidence in me. And yeah, I mean, I can definitely see United beating them over the two legs. United's improvement has been massive, and it's not something that any manager could do, and it's really impressive. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the season pans out. But I don't see it kind of being, last week a lot of people were saying about Roberto Di Matteo effect and that kind of thing, and United winning the Champions League. I don't see them being good enough for that. I think with a bit of luck and maybe the semi-finals, but ultimately I don't think they've got what it takes to do that. But I could certainly see them beating PSG for all of the reasons mentioned, and not least because some of the injuries, if you could pick the players to be injured, you'd pretty much pick the ones who are.
And I just want to, get back to that point. I mean, if we're, for example, if Pochettino came in and got the results that we're seeing with Solskjaer, you'd say, oh, Pochettino's a genius.
Yeah.
So I think that for that reason, I mean, of course, you have to wait to see how the season pans out. But, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's certainly an indication that Solskjaer has the potential to get the permanent job. I think that based on what he's done now, if a decision would have to be made today, I would give it to him. But of course, you have to see how the season plans out. But I think that he's just done so well.
Yeah. Also, if United beat Liverpool in a couple of weeks, then that will do an awful lot, because beating Liverpool is one thing, but this season, like maybe 1% of United fans want Liverpool to win the league instead of City. The rest absolutely do not want it to happen under any circumstances. And if he can play a part in that by beating Liverpool, I know there's still a lot of the season to go after that, but I think there'll be a lot of goodwill on his side for him to get it. And yeah, a combination of that and the Champions League will decide it. But if it goes well, then it would be such a ballsy decision to give it to Pochettino, even if Woodward believes that long term, and I probably think that long term it's probably a better appointment, but it would take some balls to do it if Solskjaer can have a good end of the season.
Well, we shall see. I think I'm not a United fan by any stretch, but it's always good to see someone like Solskjaer be so successful at a club so dear to him. We'll move on to our final Champions League fixture before we get on to your listener questions. We'll route through a couple of those before we shoot off. Aaron, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, as we touched on it at the beginning of the podcast, it's going to be a huge tactical battle, not one for the neutral to watch, really. But how important is the signing of Ronaldo going to be in this one? Because this is the reason they bought him, isn't it? For ties exactly like this, to give him that extra edge.
Yeah, you didn't buy Ronaldo to win Serie A for the umpteenth time in a row. You didn't buy him to score goals against Sassuolo. You bought Ronaldo to lift the Champions League trophy for the first time in over 2 decades. And honestly, I think his time at Juve will be considered a failure if he doesn't win it. That's literally the only reason he was brought in. Yes, the merchandising and the marketing there will be a huge bump for that, but the reason he was brought in is to win Champions League. And I honestly think in the next 2 to 3 years, it's that or bust. It has kind of been that way for Juve, that you kind of see them putting away or putting aside a little bit of the old traditions, a little bit of the old sentimentality, and they have become a very ruthless machine that is geared to one goal, which is winning Champions League. So especially with the way that so many teams are in flux and have showed such weird form this year, I could see them winning it, but also I could see them going out to Atletico. So I honestly have no idea what to expect from this Juventus team. I have no idea what I'm going to get from them on like a week-to-week basis. But I do believe with Ronaldo in the team, they will probably go to the semis at least. But again, you never know what you're going to get with this team.
If they were to go out to Atletico Madrid in this round, where's it going to be? What's the weakness that Atletico Madrid are going to exploit in this Juventus side?
I think one of the biggest issues for this Juventus side right now is that they cede too much initiative to opponents. So they will let teams have the ball, and especially when they're not defending at their best, that can be extremely, extremely dangerous. We've seen it against smaller teams, bigger teams. Is comfortable letting his teams play without it. Atletico can get some of their players like Koke, like Griezmann. I think Juve struggles the most with very quick, skilled players playing quick 1-2s around them and getting in behind. And if Griezmann's the work those quick combinations, it could be very dangerous for Juve.
So Griezmann is probably going to be key for Atletico Madrid in this one then.
As always.
Right, well, we'll move on to we'll quickly rattle through some listener questions. I've got 3. If you could each just, not too much detail because we're kind of well over an hour into this one. The first question is, who do you believe England's 3 best right backs are? We'll start with you, Sam. Who's your,
really?
This is hard, isn't it? I'm thinking about this.
Oh God. Well, first of all, England is in English.
Yeah.
God, I'm not even sure you could put Trippier in there.
I wouldn't put Trippier in mine.
I mean, Walker's been bad as well, but I think what he does bring to any team, England or City or whoever else might be thinking of buying him, I think Walker needs to be in there. My God.
I think you've personally.
Wan-Bissaka has got to be up there. I think
I've
the
got
season he's had.
and Alexander-Arnold in like kind of almost evenly with Trippier fourth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Wan-Bissaka, he's probably going to end up at one of the top clubs next season. And Trent Alexander-Arnold talking about what he can bring, you know, just all around right back play, but the set pieces as well, having that up his sleeve, and not just corners and free kicks from wide positions, but actual direct free kicks. So yeah, with those three in mind, actually, Trippier is nowhere near it. But yeah, so I'd go for. I mean, I'd still go overall Walker top, but I fully appreciate he's not been in great form for probably about 2 months now. But he's played an awful lot of games, so kind of benefit of the doubt. And then yeah, other than that, we're looking at young guys.
What about you two, Aaron and Zach? Agree with that, or any more names to throw in the hat?
Yeah, I think Kyle Walker just shades it right now, but he's been kind of inconsistent, and I really, really like Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Wan-Bissaka has just his growth and development over the last year or so, even from last year, has been. So I think future star, but Alexander-Arnold's been so he doesn't look like, what is he, 23 years old, 22? But yeah, I would say Walker, Alexander-Arnold, and then Trippier a little bit further down the line.
Alexander-Arnold's only 20, so there we go.
I want to fight him.
Yeah, Wan-Bissaka is only 21, which is pretty incredible considering. And it's pretty incredible considering the fact he was about to go on loan, just a year ago, and Hodgson said, "No, we need you to stay. We got an injury crisis." And just a few days later, he got his opportunity. Then we saw him play great against United, great against Tottenham. Now, I honestly don't think you could find a better right back in the Premier League this season than Bissaka. And I'd probably say the top two right now are those two guys. It's incredible considering, just look how young they are. So yeah, I agree with you too. I'll say Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm still not sure who I'd have above that, who I'd have number one, who I'd have number two. Just Wan-Bissaka playing for Palace is a lot different than playing for Liverpool. I think that Alexander-Arnold offers more on the ball, but I think that Wan-Bissaka would also probably blossom more offensively in a team like Chelsea or United. So I'll say those two, and I think I will go with Walker, but I think that he will fall out in the next 2 years or so, partly because of his declining athleticism and pace, and then also I think just failing to manage the workload. I think that just his body isn't what it used to be, and I don't think he can play as much as he used to. And I'll just rattle off a few names who I think could be in the top three. James Justin of Luton Town. And I would also add Max Aarons of Norwich. But, I'm going to say Reece James is going to be the one to crack into the top three. I really like the player, really like what I've seen from him at Wigan this season. And honestly, Chelsea at right back, Azpilicueta has been, frankly, a weakness of theirs this season. I think that Reece James has what it takes to become, really the right back that Sarri's system demands. And I think that he'll be top three by 2020.
Lovely stuff. And the next one is a double barrel question from Stephen Moore on Twitter. It's your top three La Liga and top three Premier League breakout stars this season. We'll come to you for this first one, Aaron. Do you want to run through your top three La Liga breakout stars and top three Premier League breakout stars?
Ooh, that's a tough one. All right, for La Liga, off the top of my head, very quickly, Vinicius Jr. I think also Rodri from Atletico Madrid has been very, very good. Third one. Who's the third one for me?
Chukwueze, the PSV Niger followers. Chukwueze.
I don't
Some
think
of
I've not actually seen him play that much, so I'm
okay.
not gonna say him.
I can't think of many.
I haven't watched a lot of La Liga this year. I'm not gonna lie, so I'm gonna. I really like Arthur. Big fan of Arthur, but even before he signed it at Barcelona, so I'll say Arthur as well. For the Prem, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I think is a big one. Matteo Guendouzi, because I'm a big Arsenal fan. And then I will say, who else will we say? I'm gonna name not a player, and it's gonna be Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Nice left field. One name I'm going to chuck into the hat and see if any of you agree. James Maddison for the Premier League, especially.
Yeah, he's been a breath of fresh air, especially for a young English player with that much technical ability.
I mean, the game the other day, losing 3-1 to Tottenham, he was absolutely phenomenal in that. Sam, what about you? You got any names to throw in the hat here?
Harry Winks doesn't really count now, does he? I mean, I know he hasn't. I probably don't think Harry Winks counts, but if I'm not allowed to have him, then I quite like the look of Oliver Skipp. He's kind of very similar at Spurs, and I think they've both got a bit more about them than Eric Dyer in terms of use of the ball and dictating a game with kind of positive actions. They're two that I'd like to throw in really. I mean, Hudson-Odoi to even be in the conversation at Chelsea is kind of testament to how good he is, because again, you've got to kind of consider the level of players that he's competing against, even if their form's dipped a bit recently. I think Hudson-Odoi needs to be in there as well. But I mean, the rest are all just kind of bubbling under the surface, and people like Ryan Sessegnon, who expected to have a big season. He's just completely unnecessarily hampered by Ryan Babel being signed. So it's difficult. So for players like Skipp and Winks to establish themselves, I'm kind of happy with that. And Hudson-Odoi, for him to just be there, even with his lack of game time, I think that's credit to him as well. But there's not an awful amount of real top level this season. I don't think.
No, Aaron Ramsey has just been confirmed by Juventus, by the way. It's official on their Twitter right now. Zach, we'll finish off with you. Any other last names for all our listeners to look up and keep a keen eye out on?
Right, so Spain, I would probably go with Bryce Mendes from Celta Vigo, Joan Jordan from Eibar, and Fernando Calero from Real Valladolid. From England, I would have to say, it's a bit tough, but I would probably say Ben Chilwell. Really like what I've seen from him, completely sending Christian Fuchs to the bench and progressing as one of the most promising left backs in Europe. Really big fan of him. Who else? I will go with one player who is not necessarily a youngster, but he's also wasn't really considered the real deal until this season. Raul Jimenez, been really good for Wolverhampton this season. Wolves, there was talk of, do they have the strikers necessary to, get to take the step up? And Raul has just been lights out from that striker position, offering everything you could ask for. Third one is a bit difficult. I'm not sure if I'd go with Declan Rice or Wan-Bissaka as they were breaking out last season. So I wouldn't necessarily go with either of them. But, I'll go with Issa Diop, who's been great for West Ham this season, really stepped up. And yeah. Also, another one that I forgot to mention from Spain, Youssef En-Nesyri, really stepped up for Leganés this season.
Let me also shout out Ruben Neves from Wolves. I don't know why I forgot him. I think it's because I forgot that he was in the championship last year, and it feels like he's just been in the Prem for so long. But Ruben Neves has been fantastic.
I was going to say you could name any of the Wolves players, and I wouldn't have disagreed at all. I think they've just been fantastic this season.
Yeah, Matt Doherty too. Actually, if we're just going on Wolves, I kind of forget that. Yeah, I suppose a lot of these guys are breaking out, especially Neves wise, but he's kind of been bubbling away under the surface for a while now. But yeah, he's so impressive, and the fact that he's so young, I mean, unless he's had a birthday recently, he's only 21. That's incredible, really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to try and sell him, but unfortunately, Wolves fans, he's not staying with you forever. He's definitely going to be at one of the elite clubs soon. We'll call it there because I think we're an hour and a half in, and Wolves Newcastle is on very, very soon, so we better get to watching that. Thank you all for coming on. I do appreciate your time, and if you just want to run through and tell us where to find you, Aaron, do you want to tell everyone where we can find you online?
Yeah, I am on all social media platforms, AWest, AYYY_West.
Thank you. And what are you up to now? What stuff you got going on?
I am working as a freelance journalist right now, just trying to tell these stories that need to be told.
Very nice. So keep an eye out for some of that work. Sam, do you want to tell us the same things?
Yeah. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Sammy_goal. Facebook, if anyone's still using that, if this still shows up on the algorithms, then I mean, I'm not even sure. I guess you just search Sam Lee and hope for the best. But yeah, I'm the City correspondent, and we're trying to keep on top of what's a pretty fascinating club at all levels, really. And also doing radio now, a bit of radio. So I suppose it's, given they do a podcast of the shows, it's probably a rival to you guys, and I'm probably not doing anyone any favors. But yeah, so I'm a bit of radio and hoping that's a route to go down, because nobody's reading anything anymore. So let's try something else. So yeah, that's the Manchester Football Social on XS Manchester, if anybody is particularly interested in that.
Very nice. Competition is healthy.
Yeah.
And Zach, do you want to tell us where you are again?
All right, find me on Zach Lowy on Twitter, or BTL Vid, or any of the other associated accounts with Breaking Lines. I just want to thank Connor for hosting this. Dude did a great job once again. I want to thank Andy West, Sammy Lee. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on. And to any employers looking out for a really talented, hungry content creator, Aaron West is your guy. You can't go wrong with him. Thank you so much for coming on, man. Thank you so much. Hire this man.
All right, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. And to those of you listening, please review on iTunes, subscribe, and we shall see you next week for an MLS preview special. See you then.